So we've got a couple of questions teed up. So the first one is about emissions. Why is the preference for expensive in-state generation versus less expensive renewable generation from out of state? Isn't Hydro-Quebec Power the same as local solar regarding emissions? It's for Joel, yeah.
I'm sorry, could you just say that again?
Yeah, why is there a preference for in-state generation versus less expensive renewable generation? Isn't Hydro-Quebec Power the same as local solar regarding emissions?
So there's two things I guess I would respond to that. First of all, with respect to, there was the question in terms of where do you put your resources in terms of moving the grid. So any investments that we make, it doesn't make sense to be spending that money simply to associate green attributes with existing resources. And so we're the only state in New England that does that. And so while I think that Hydro-Quebec potentially presents, a great opportunity in terms of an existing resource, the question is how do we spend our dollars and how do we move to a greener grid? And the other piece is that a lot of the question about the cost of in-state, there's a lot of assumptions that underlie that assertion that in-state resources are actually more expensive. So when you look at a full cost-benefit analysis, the opportunities that exist with in-state resources are enormous. So when you look at, for example, we as a company, just this year alone have been spending probably through GMP over $1 million in terms of direct investments in terms of modernizing the grid. So a lot of the work that's happening in terms of moving us to a more resilient, modern grid is happening through these types of in-state resources. Also, there are economic opportunities that exist when you distribute the generation, so that there's actually a lot of opportunities that exist for our schools and our towns in terms of being able to save money on their power. There's taxes that are being paid, and then there's also the ultimately very important issue in terms of resiliency. And so when we provide our power locally, especially when we combine it with storage, as we move towards a modern clean energy grid, we're providing ourselves with security environmentally and in terms of our energy as we sort of look towards more extreme weather events in the future.
Great, thanks. Question for Lauren. Can you say more about what it would look like to align state functions around this mandate?
Yeah, so I think one of the major benefits of a Global Warming Solutions Act is kind of what's missing right now is having our state government actually doing the work to put forward a plan. I was just last night looking at the Massachusetts kind of 10-year assessment of where they've been with their Global Warming Solutions Act and their plan for moving forward, and the kind of analyses and assessments and the proposals and policies and regulations they're putting forward in order to stay on track to meet their commitments. And I think, well, there's a lot of good work being done on measuring our greenhouse gas emissions and that kind of report, and there's EAN does its great report, but our state government right now is not tasked with figuring out how do we get there, what's it going to take, and then having the authority through rules and regulations to put those programs in place. So that key function, I think, is what one of the benefits of having a Global Warming Solutions Act would be.
Thank you. Some great questions, so keep going. You guys have done a great job in there. Quickly, Rebecca and Kristen, do either or both of you see the investigation currently underway that Tom Nauer mentioned? Do you see that as a vehicle to affect the change you're looking to affect?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, that was too easy.
It's so important.
Okay.
That's why everyone should participate, per Tom's request earlier. We need as many voices and ideas as possible in that forum.
Presuming that, and I'll paraphrase this a bit, presuming that work will likely arguably could take more resources, do you have additional funding mechanisms in mind? And if so, what are they?
I guess the question of funding is an important one. My starting point is understanding both what we need to accomplish to address the climate problem in front of us and what we can afford as a state. So I think with those two challenges, because those things are different, what we can afford is probably going to be less than what's needed. My starting point is trying to make best use of existing resources that we have. So that's why I'm arguing to try and shift some of the work of Efficiency Vermont more toward greenhouse gas reductions rather than just megawatt hour reductions, because I think that's the most pressing challenge we have today. But as the proceeding unfolds, I think we will see other funding sources discussed, things like TCI, as we talked about earlier, things like potential new fuel taxes. I'm sure there'll be a plethora of discussion, thermal, renewable energy credits. So the funding discussion will be robust, is my projection. But I'm hoping that as we have that funding conversation as part of the study, we can also talk about whether we need to change the uses that we put our current funding sources toward.
Great, thank you. Joel, quick question here. Combine two questions. Solar, the evidence is that solar is dropping off in terms of percentage and build out in the state of Vermont. So given that fact, and given, I guess most would argue, a stalled wind industry in the state of Vermont, exactly what sources and where would you see, what are the sources going to come and to fulfill new tier 2 requirements?
So there's actually an enormous opportunity that exists with in-state solar. So there has been this decline, but that, I guess, is what I'm saying, is directly connected not to the impossibility of doing it in-state, but just connected to state policies, which are right now set at a level which is fairly low. So if we change our tier 2 requirements so that we're looking to bring more of our energy mix from in-state resources, there's an enormous opportunity. The amount of area in terms of land and roofs and others that you need to meet our clean energy our challenges with local solar can easily be achieved. And we've shown sort of before that we have the capacity to do this in a fashion which is well aligned with sort of Vermont's ethos in terms of how do you want to have it. I mean, we as a company, for example, work to see how the solar can be integrated as much as possible into the landscape. That actually preserves agricultural land. So these arrays are only here for a period of time, 25 to 35 years, but it's a crucial period of time. After that, the land can be returned to full agricultural use. Even during that time, in terms of like bee-friendly pollinators and grazing and things like that, can be an active part of the landscape. And so this is what we argue, is that there's actually, it's a win-win. It is very possible to meet our clean energy challenges with these local solar resources.
Great. Lauren, quick question for you, please. There's a lot of love and affection for your proposal. People are saying, of course, it's a no-brainer.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome.
It's a good proposal. Lots of
But what? So let me ask you this: what do you see as the biggest obstacle? If there's so much support for here, and understand this is a portion of the world, but what do you see as the biggest obstacle to getting this done?
I mean, I think this one, given that other states have done this, we have models, it's a pretty simple statute, it's really political will. So our good friends, the legislators who are here, let's talk to them, let's support our good allies trying to get this passed and enacted. I don't think there's any structural challenges. I mean, I think part of the law needs to be making sure we're setting up our state government to succeed and do it right and do it well. So that should absolutely be part of the conversation, but I think we can absolutely do it. And it's just the lining up the politics to get it right.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I think a follow-up on that is how do Green Mountain Power and Efficiency Vermont see their place in Global Warming Solutions Act? And to go a little bit further is how do you see the three of your proposals really coordinating and aligning for greater impact?
I'm sorry, Lauren was talking to me. I missed the first part of it.
How does GMP and EVT, how do you see your role in the Global Warming Solutions Act?
So I'll go first. I'm not as familiar with the Global Solutions Act. I heard a little bit about it today. I think from our perspective, we're all in on how do we address this climate crisis and do it in a way that's cost effective. There was a question earlier about budgeting and do we need more money? And I love where that heart is coming from, but I think EVT's budget is around like $60 million. And so how powerful a resource would it be if we were able to redirect those funds to the areas that we know are causing the largest sources of climate crisis in our state? We know it's not coming from the electricity sector anymore. We know it's coming from transportation and heating. If we want to make progress, and when I see the pictures of the kids protesting, my daughter is one of them, it's like if we need to make progress, we have to get dramatic and bold around those two areas. And so just having that pivot created I think is great. And it could be a comparison, I think. I think they're completely aligned in terms of that same outcome and goals. I don't see it as a disparate effort at all.
What I would add to that is that Efficiency Vermont, I think, is an important delivery mechanism for greenhouse gas reduction in the state. You know, we have been the subject and the recipient of millions of dollars of investment that electric ratepayers and the state has put in over the years. And now there's this infrastructure that exists, you know, in terms of program design and delivery and planning and verification, and staff that have relationships with the top 300 energy users in the state, and you know, residential customers who come to us and ask advice and view us as this trusted advisor that can help them navigate their energy decisions. So all of that infrastructure, I think, could and should be redeployed toward our largest challenge. So if something like the Global Warming Solutions Act were to pass, I think the state would be looking around for delivery mechanisms to help us ensure that we meet those goals. And I think Efficiency Vermont could be part of that.
Great. Anything?
Yeah, I mean, just as I sort of mentioned in passing when I was speaking, that I sort of view it as high level and more detailed. That the Global Warming Solutions Act is sort of making our commitment as opposed to simply a goal. And then the question is, how do we go about doing that? And like, what does that look like in terms of the details? Like, how do you actually implement 100% renewable energy standard by 2030? And so this is where we're advocating for, you know, more in-state resources and work that can be done in Tier 3 in terms of addressing heating and transportation. But I see them sort of high level and then detail, sort of all working together.
Great, thanks. So another question, in the all fuel structure, what happens to BED and VGS's current programs if Efficiency Vermont becomes the all fuels efficiency utility?
Great question. I'm glad to be able to address that one head on. The way I see it playing out and what we're going to be bringing to that proceeding is that Efficiency Vermont's geographic scope would not increase. So we're not interested in taking over Burlington Electric Department's programs. You know, they have an amazing team. They have an amazing focus, the Net Zero City. They already have the Tier 3 work, the efficiency work. Like, all of that is working together very well. But in the areas where we do work across the rest of the state, that's where we see this gap between what Efficiency Vermont can offer and what the distribution utilities are offering through their Tier 3 programs. So we're really talking about trying to change what we offer, not where we play. And I think that additional flexibility in terms of the kinds of programs and services that we can work with the utilities to provide would yield the greatest benefits for Vermonters, and that's what we want to do.
And we only had 5 minutes, so we cut out a lot of stuff, but I want all of the energy experts in this room to know, like, this collaboration and the collaboration with other utilities in the room and Efficiency Vermont is happening, because we know it's the right thing to do. It's what Tier 3 enables us to do, but we're asking for us to really unlock the potential to make more progress. And so if anyone's interested, we have a list that our teams have worked together on really dramatic carbon reductions for paper mills, for greenhouses, and the list goes on and on.
Low-income customers, multifamily. There's a ton of opportunity out there that's just waiting for somebody to kind of come and unlock.
Okay, thank you. Quick question, keep the questions coming in, please. Let me ask you that there's a lot of talk about commitments and mandates and the like, and mindful of the speakers earlier today, and one of the things we've tried to keep in the room, folks who are struggling to get by, would you all be willing to make a commitment to no new net rate increase, and if not, why not?
For Efficiency Vermont, I mean, we're not 100% of the electric bill by any stretch, but yes. I mean,
Rebecca, I'm just going to interrupt you,
yeah.
but you make requests based on.
Oh, sure. Yep. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to do over the last few years is come in flat budget compared to the last cycle. We're planning our next 3-year plan now, flat budget, absorb inflation, really looking to find all of the efficiencies that we can and make sure that we're delivering as much back to Vermonters as possible. So yes, for us, like I said before, I want us to use our existing resources in the best way possible, not to gather a whole bunch more resources to the Efficiency Vermont programming.
And I will say for Green Mountain Power, our North Star is how can we deliver our electricity as low cost as possible. There are a lot of competing pressures on that, a lot of things which are entirely out of our control. So what we pay into the regional grid is something we can't control, and guess what's happening to that? Some of the state energy policies impact the cost to our customers. But we're saying, how can we move forward and do it as cost effectively as possible? And by the way, moving towards smart electrification for folks in this room who are concerned about low-income Vermonters who maybe to date haven't been able to afford the transformation. When we electrify more of our sector, that benefits all of our customers through lower costs. That goes back to everybody, because right now in GMP, we have a declining load, which means more fixed costs shared among all of our customers. And so if we can get people to move to electric vehicles, when we get people to share access with us, when we can get people into battery storage and innovative programs that drive down peak, that benefit goes 100% back to customers. So that's why this work in Tier 3 is so critical in the way it was designed in the legislature, because that empowers us to help drive down the cost pressures that we're facing in a very tough energy landscape that is changing.
Yes.
Please, Joe.
So I think that that's actually a key point, this idea when I sort of showed the amount of money that the state spends in terms of heating and transportation, that's an economic opportunity. As we electrify and build that load for GMP, that's something that benefits
For our customers, it all goes back to customers. So just so you guys, there's always this misperception, and we think of customers, and so when that load is built, in our state and our regulators know this, we're decoupled, so like it just 100% benefits our customers.
Right, and sort of also building on that, I also want to make the point that what people pay is not a rate, but what they pay is a bill. And so when we're looking at sort of a modern clean energy grid, we're looking towards distributing the ownership of those energy assets. And that means that the value associated with that now is distributed throughout all of us. And we're looking at this transformation. And those people who sort of take on the challenge of providing their own energy then get to benefit from that, because we're all participating. And that benefits them economically. But it also benefits us as a state in terms of providing this more resilient grid, and at the same time providing us with that clean energy. So again, I think it's important to think of what does this modern clean energy look like and how that distributes these benefits more broadly.
Do you want to respond to that, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add for us, I mean, we work really closely with the Vermont Low Income Advocacy Council, Capstone, other partners, really making sure that the proposals we're putting forward are going to help all Vermonters and are protective of our most vulnerable. Global Warming Solutions Act is something that those groups had signed on in support of, and I think you can structure that kind of policy to explicitly build in equity and considerations around who's going to be impacted, and let's make sure that we're putting forward a suite of policies that are going to help everybody come along successfully in the transition. So for this particular policy, I think that would be kind of core to how it would need to be structured, how we want it to be structured.
Thank you. Of course, Joel. Would you give Joel a
One quick follow-up, sorry, is just that this idea in terms of we as a company and others in the industry have been working hard to try to make it easier for low-income people to be able to participate in solar. So I think that that's one of the challenges, and we've had a number of successes there in terms of how do you make it more broadly available. I would also sort of point out that a lot of the systems that we do for schools and towns distribute that benefit very broadly to taxpayers.
Thank you. All right, last question I'm being told, so same sort of drill. This is a great audience to help you get done what you've just pitched, what you've just proposed to get done. So do your close and make your ask of this audience to help you get this done, please.
All right, we've heard a lot today about the great work that's being done, the creative thinking, the innovation, a lot of enthusiasm, passion, a lot of caring about the future of ourselves and our kids. We need accountability. We saw at the beginning of the day when Jared started that it's only in states that are holding themselves accountable to actually making the process work for achieving the kinds of decreases in our climate pollution that we need. So while I think so many of the great ideas we've heard today would be the kinds of things, the kind of programs and policies you put in place to actually achieve that, having that fundamental framework is going to be essential to acting commensurate with the challenge that we face. So I hope you will call on our great legislative allies to support and enact the Global Warming Solutions Act in 2020.
All right. Stand on
I was
up.
gonna say, we didn't prepare this.
No, that's
We prepared
okay.
the other thing, but.
Okay, my one word is alignment. So asking this group to support aligning Efficiency Vermont and all of the utilities across the state to work together and go get as much greenhouse gas reduction as we possibly can with our resources.
And this is a powerful room, so I know that if we all can create that alignment, it's gonna happen. So like, we're asking for your help, because if you want to address the climate crisis, transportation and heating, realign a great team and a great resources, the work's already happened, but if you want to have a dramatic shift forward and accelerate that progress, this is the proposal.
Thank you.
Great. So I think that like one of the things that's so key with 100% by 30 is that it directly aligns with the understanding that we all have in terms of the climate crisis, is that we need to make dramatic action, or we need to take dramatic action in the next dozen years. And this is a way in which Vermont can reassert itself in terms of its leadership potential. And when we do this, there really are strong opportunities. Again, if we do this in a way that really looks at what are the full benefits that are available to us as we move towards 100% green renewable energy, we're creating a resilient, modern grid with distributed benefits for our schools and our towns and our citizens. And at the same time, we're creating a strong economic opportunity for the state as we look towards like a vibrant clean energy economy for the future.
Thank you. Let's give it up for our presenters.